What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of AKP Sports Talk. It's been a couple of weeks now, but we're back and better than ever. Back right in time for the NFL trade deadline, which is this afternoon. But before we get into that, how are you doing today, Korea?
Look, you mentioned it. I mean, life gets in the way, but we're here. We're back, and you mentioned it. Today is November 1st, which means today is the NFL trade deadline. Today is the first day we get the true college football playoff ranking. Those are coming out as we're speaking right now. So, definitely, we're hitting those latter months into the NFL and especially the college football season. We still have postseason baseball. Look, it's a lot of fun right now, and I'm excited to see what this trade deadline has its effects, positive or negative, for both teams.
Yep, so we'll get right into it. We'll start off with the first trade from this morning that kind of shocked everyone. Oh, I said the Vikings. Oh, that means TJ Hawkinson. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, TJ Hockenson going to the Vikings.
To the
I'll get into
Vikings.
it.
Yeah.
So this trade, definitely a little bit of a shock, but when we found out the details about Irv Smith Jr. being out for a long amount of time, definitely a big move, especially interdivision as well. The Vikings getting TJ Hawkinson along with a couple picks and then going a couple picks going to the Lions as well. Ari, look, this trade shocked a lot of people, but at the same time, the Vikings, they're a good team. They're 6-1. They're leading that division. They're one of the best teams offensively. Defensively, they're not as strong, but they can get it done offensively, and that really all that matters. And now, look, you pair T.J. Hockenson and at an All-Pro. Oh, okay. So sorry, I'm watching the reveal. They've just put Alabama at number 6, what I was saying, you put TJ Hockenson with that offense that has Dalvin Cook already, Adam Thielen, Justin Jefferson, an emerging Kirk Cousins. This is definitely a shocker, but does this make the Vikings a little more of a lot more of contenders? I mean, look, you have this Vikings team, right? Who was already doing good things this year. I talked about this offense, and this offense is pretty much producing at the level that I kind of expected them to produce at. And now you bring in now you bring in a Pro Bowl tight end who will pretty much be a big difference maker offensively and open that field up. What do you like, what do you like about TJ Hockenson on this Vikings offense that already is, pretty loaded, but definitely have some good mouths to feed on that offense?
Yeah, I mean, right after this news broke, I believe Joe Schefter said that Irv Smith was going to be out for the next 8 to 10 weeks due to an ankle sprain. So
Wow.
that was part of the trade. I mean, he moves from an offense it's kind of a similar situation because the Lions, you have a clear RB1 and clear wide receiver one, with Swift and Amon-Ra, and then Jamal Williams, and then with the Vikings, you have the same type of format, I guess, for lack of better terms, with Dalvin Cook and Justin Jefferson, and then of course you also have Adam Thielen. So I mean, I was a little bit confused about this for the Lions. I mean, they basically move up 2 rounds in the next year's draft from the 4th to the 2nd, and then 1 round basically in the 2024 draft from a conditional 4th to a 3rd. So I mean, I guess the Lions didn't maybe want to pay Hockenson. He's going to be a free agent after next season. So maybe this is just an idea of, getting more capital for him before they have to pay him or before he's a free agent. But then, trading into the division is a little bit confusing as well, kind of in this context. But I mean, yeah, it's a low risk, high reward type of trade for the Vikings. You mentioned them getting off to the fast start, 6-1, but some are still a little hesitant to call them, a Super Bowl contender, even though the NFC is so, weak and so wide open. But I mean, clearly adding in, a former, he's the number 8 pick, I believe, somewhere around there in the draft. So, a first round capital, clearly super talented. So, I mean, for fantasy purposes with Hawkinson, I mean, clearly Cook and Jefferson are still the clear, 1 and 2 in the offense, for touches. I still value him relatively the same. I mean, it's still a shallow position, so it's still going to be, a mid-end tight end 1 just because of how shallow the position is. I still worry a little bit about inconsistency, just, competing with Thielen for the number 3, on the offense behind Cook and Jefferson. But he's still capable of, exploding, any given week in that offense behind Cook and Jefferson. They have the firepower to score 30 plus any given week, in that offense. So, I mean, all in all, I still value Hockenson relatively the same. He's still a mid-end tight end 1 who's going to be a little bit consistent, a little bit, dependent on touchdowns at times. But, I mean, if you don't have Kelsey or a healthy Andrews, Hawkinson's definitely up there after those 2.
Yeah, sorry for my reactions. I'm watching this. This George is at 3. What? That's ridiculous to me. That's already a stretch below Ohio State and Tennessee, but that's a different story. As you mentioned, look, I like this.
Tennessee 1.
Yeah, I know that. I don't know. I don't know what they see in Tennessee, but yeah, you look at TJ Hockenson, right? And he's proven to be a really good, dependable receiver for this offense. And I feel like this offense bringing in, TJ Hockenson for the Vikings, it kind of really just spreads out the field a lot more, in my opinion. You have Justin Jefferson on the outside, definitely the number 1 target pretty much in all of football right now. You have Adam Thielen, who's a solid wide receiver 2 on that team. They also, they have other guys along, other playmakers on that offense, along with Alexander Mattison. They also have, obviously, Dalvin Cook. And now you bring in TJ Hockenson. And he's not known, he's known for his blocking ability. Yes, that's true. But, in the past game, that's where he's really lethal. And you mentioned it. He was a pick number 8, so he was picked pretty high for this Lions team. And, nothing really developed under him. And, that offense is transitioning to a lot more mouths to feed it, essentially, with, a returning Jameson Williams coming back soon. They're definitely going to be bringing in definitely going to be using Amon St. Brown differently. And, this was kind of a shocker in my opinion as well. And I didn't really think that, the Vikings would really try to acquire a tight end, but obviously that was after before the Irv Smith news broke. But in the end, I mean, I was shocked to see that this Vikings team would trade for a tight end. Obviously, they know that they're for real, but for the Lions, obviously, it kind of feels like, you really gave up so early on TJ Hockenson, someone who could, really be, a key member of that core down the road. Because, the main problem for the Lions was not really the tight end position. It was more of, the quarterback, Jared Goff, the transitional quarterback going out. And then they're probably going to draft someone coming up this year, maybe with Stroud or, Bryce Young, Will Levis, all the quarterbacks that are in this upcoming draft that are, it's pretty star-studded at the quarterback position. I thought that, them leaving TJ Hockenson on that team would, kind of be a good fit, to kind of bridge that core. But I guess the Lions are just kind of in this already given up mode, not really successful. They already can hold the number 1 pick right now. So I definitely can see where they're coming from in this. But, definitely kind of a shock. But, I'd love to see how how Hockenson is used for an offense that already is very pass heavy, but definitely that West Coast style that the Vikings pretty much have ran under their head coach Kevin O'Connell. I couldn't remember his name for a second, but that's what he brings to this offense. The West Side Coast style that he was down for the Rams now brings that into the Vikings, and I could see Hawkinson's value going up a little, but I don't really see it going up a huge lot just because Kirk Cousins is Mr. Inconsistent at times. There's so many questions surrounding Kirk Cousins himself that I just don't know that you can really depend on Hockenson in and week out to really put up, top 5 numbers. But he is a top 5, potentially top 5 tight end in the league. So definitely a big trade over there. We're going to get into our next trade.
I was just going to bring up on the line side like your point. I mean, Cousins is still probably an upgrade from Goff either way. So, but then when you have Jefferson and Cook still dominating, kind of touches and targets in that offense, still could lead to some inconsistency. But on the line side, with Hockenson gone, that opens up, not a pretty tight end spot, but I mean, with how weak the tight end spot is, they had Brock Wright was the kind of the backup tight end, but he got concussed last week. And so it was reported that they're going to get a look at James Mitchell, who is out of Virginia Tech, a 5th-round pick from this past year, a rookie. So, I mean, in 12-team leagues, you're still looking at guys like Evan Ingram, Isaiah Likely, Tyler Conklin. So I wouldn't be looking at someone like James Mitchell in 12-team leagues, but in 14, 16-team leagues, like leagues that are that deep, James Mitchell could be worth a look potentially, just given the state of the tight end position. And again, after Kelsey and Andrews, I mean, there's really no stability with anyone. After Kelsey, and now Andrews has hurt himself. So James Mitchell is the one to look at if you're in, a super deep league. So now we'll get into the next trade, which is Chase Claypool to the Bears. I believe it was just a second round pick that they got back. So you got, a number 2. I still think Mooney will be the number 1 in Chicago, Claypool number 2. But you get Justin Fields another weapon. They've really seemed to open up the playbook for him a little bit these past couple of weeks. And then now, on the Steelers side, all of Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, and Pat Freiermuth should all see at least a slight bump, because Claypool for the last 4 weeks saw 9 targets, 7, 8, and 6. So he was, pretty heavily involved the past 4 weeks in the Steelers offense. Deontay was starting to kind of really fall off from, his consistent value that we've saw the past couple of seasons. Ben Roethlisberger, under center. But now you see Pat Freiermuth has kind of been a steady tight end. I mean, the past, handful of games, 7 targets, 9 targets, 2 targets, but then 9 targets. So he's been really heavily involved compared to, most tight ends. Most tight ends don't see that type of target volume. Korea, what's kind of your takeaway from this? We saw the Bears trade with Roquan Smith, so they're kind of really tanking on the defensive side and kind of seeing what Fields has on the offensive side. What was your takeaway from this trade?
Yeah, definitely for the Bears, they've obviously needed a wide receiver almost all season. They've had so many inconsistencies on offense. They've obviously used a lot more of Justin Fields, and that's because of the fact that this offense is just, not, producing at the wide receiver position. They definitely had a lot of, scramble plays designed for Justin Fields. Obviously, a lot more Khalil Herbert / David Montgomery in the backfield as well. But, Darnold, as you mentioned, I still believe Mooney's going to be the number 1 receiver again for the Bears. But, you bring in Claypool, who has the size, and I feel like that definitely will be a big addition for this offense. Definitely give Justin Fields at least someone to throw the ball to other than Cole Kmet, who has, been used at times. But still, I believe that this trade for the Bears, does not help them a whole lot, but it helps them more, as a team. For value-wise, for Chase Claypool, you really can't depend on that going from a horrible offense to an even worse offense for the wide receiver position. So it really puts in question, like, what do you really see the value of Chase Claypool at? I would love to say, he's definitely going to have a big upgrade and he's definitely going to be a lot better. But at the same time, I mean, you really can't depend on that when, the Bears love to run the ball more than they love to throw. And for the Steelers, obviously, they're definitely in sell mode right now. Obviously, they thought they could do it with Kenny Pickett or Mitch Trubisky, just the replacement for Big Ben after he retired. And, both of them have been struggling all year. And, Najee Harris has had a really down year as well at the running back position. So, for the Steelers, obviously, I want to say that this is definitely a good trade. I feel like they could have got a little more out of it, but, in this kind of market, Chase Claypool, his value really declined during the TikTok era with Juju Smith-Schuster in Pittsburgh. But at the same time, he's still an elite receiver, out of for the Steelers. But now he moves to Chicago, and I feel like, this definitely could be a new kind of beginning for him. But at the same time, you don't really know what that Bears offense is going to look like. And Justin Fields, he looks like he has 2 seconds to throw the ball in the pocket every single game. So, it really – you really struggle to see any kind of bright moves for Chase Claypool if Justin Fields is getting swallowed up in the first 15 seconds, the first 10 seconds at the line. So I don't see that much value, but at the same time, obviously Chase Claypool is now a wide receiver, probably a wide receiver 2, now going to the Bears. but still behind Darnell Mooney. And, Fields and Mooney definitely have that connection. So it's definitely going to take some work for Chase Claypool to kind of fit himself into this Bears offense that loves to run the ball pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised they even got a second round for him. I thought maybe a third round. They weren't going to get more than that. But I mean, like you said, he goes from a crowded offense in Pittsburgh to a low volume passing offense in Chicago. Maybe this move makes them a little bit more pass heavy, but probably not enough to make both Mooney and Claypool really super relevant. And then we've seen Mooney step up the past few weeks. He looked a little bit better. We've seen the Bears kind of utilize Justin Fields more out of the pocket, which has allowed him more to not to run when he needs to, but also kind of keep plays alive, because when he was just kind of dropping back, in the pocket, that's kind of when the pocket was collapsing, but letting him kind of go left or go right outside the pocket has allowed him to kind of open up, the playbook a little bit more and, find guys like Mooney. And, even Komet showed some sort of life, recently. I mean, obviously Claypool will be the wide receiver 2 for Chicago, but for fantasy purposes, I think he's a low-end wide receiver 3. He'll have his kind of big plays if Fields starts to throw the ball deep a little bit more. I looked on Player Profiler, and Fields is number 14 right now in deep pass attempt, which is higher than I thought. I thought he'd be lower than that. But, yeah, I mean, Claypool is probably like a low-end wide receiver 3. Mooney, a high-end wide receiver 3, I would say. And then, all three of Deontay Pickens and Farmer all see slight bumps, but Claypool's targets going away. Still hard to trust, Kenny Pickett and that offense overall. But just in terms of opportunity and volume, they should all see a slight, uptick in opportunity and volume. So now we'll go to probably the biggest trade of the day. Denver trading Bradley Chubb to the Dolphins in exchange for the 49ers first-round pick this upcoming season, and a fourth round in 2024, and Chase Edmonds, and then Chubb in a 2025 fifth going to the Dolphins. It seems like kind of like a win-win type of deal for both sides, where the Dolphins trade away. I believe they still have their own first-round pick, so they trade away, not their own first-round pick. And then they get, an elite pass rusher that Denver, needed the first round pick. And they kind of have, they have Randy Gregory, who's banged up. And they also have Baron Browning and Nick Bonito, who are kind of younger guys who have shown flashes. So I think they kind of had to make this trade just given the state of the team. Chase Edmonds, I think it was the GM, I believe, of the Dolphins said that, of the Broncos said that Melvin Gordon is still the lead back, but they're still going to utilize Latavius Murray and Edmonds, so it's going to be a kind of nightmare of a three-way timeshare is what it seems like. Edmonds was signed to be the lead back in Miami this offseason, and he kind of struggled early on, and Raheem Mostert kind of took the job and didn't look back. I didn't mention it, but then we also have the Dolphins trading for Jeff Wilson. So it looks like Jeff Wilson will kind of take over Edmonds' role as the number 2, and then Mostert should remain the number 1, in Miami. But Craig, what was your takeaway on this trade for both the Dolphins and the Broncos from a real life standpoint, and also, I guess, for the Broncos backfield for fantasy purposes?
Yeah, so definitely for the Dolphins, they are looking to make a splash, and they made that splash. They have, definitely a very stout defense now, bringing in All-Pro Bradley Chubb, and I heard that they're going to try and make him stay in Miami, trying to get a long-term deal with him after the season. So that'll definitely be big for that Dolphins team. And then obviously trading away Edmonds, and it looked like, there was the battle coming into camp. We talked about it between Edmonds and Mostert, who's really going to be the lead back, just because, both of them have that breakout speed, and they play kind of similarly at the running back position, all speed, all speed off, no breaks and stuff like that. And now Mostert, you mentioned, kind of just took off and ran with it, and now he's the lead back. And I feel like this is definitely a good move for this Dolphins team. I mean, definitely on the defensive side, they have that Bradley Chubb is an all-pro. He is a stud. And now, you pair a great offense and you build on that defense, and the Miami Dolphins are coming. And I feel like they are definitely competing not only now in that just in the whole AFC, but potentially for the AFC East crown, depending on what happens with the Bills, obviously. But then you look at the Broncos, right? And it was definitely kind of a struggle trying to bring in Bradley Chubb and sign him. And, there were definitely a lot of talks and frustrations with the team, obviously not having the best record, but they sit 3-5. They got a first round pick. So they do have a first rounder now next year instead of not having any first rounder due to the Russell Wilson trade. So they now bring in a first rounder. That's San Francisco's pick. And then they also bring in Chase Edmonds. And then you mentioned Edmonds. I feel like Edmonds is just more of a filler because they lost that speed, agility with Javonte Williams for the season. You mentioned Melvin Gordon is still going to be the lead back according to the Broncos GM, and that possibly could be the case. And I kind of still feel like Melvin Gordon will probably be the lead back just because he knows that system well. Alongside Latavius Murray and now bringing in Chase Edmonds, you have a three-headed back in that backfield for the Broncos. But this is definitely a big win for the Dolphins, who definitely have the pieces around them to make it into the playoffs and potentially have a deep run in the playoffs leading to the Super Bowl. I feel like this is a big move for a team that is really trying to win it now. And then you mentioned the Jeff Wilson trade. Definitely another piece. I mean, Mike McDaniel, we talked about it. He came from San Fran to coach Miami, and now he brings in another back from San Francisco. So it's just bringing all the San Francisco backs to Miami. I can see Elijah Mitchell going to Miami in the offseason probably now that the Niners brought in Christian McCaffrey in their trade. But yeah, this is definitely a big move for this Dolphins team. I don't feel like the Broncos have given up just yet. I feel like just because their defense was kind of in this position where Bradley Chubb was probably not going to come back next year and they wanted to get some value for him. Obviously, they still have Randy Gregory on the defensive side of the ball, but definitely kind of a letdown to let your all-pro just be traded like that to a team that is really trying to, make a name in this AFC, not AFC East, but just AFC as a whole. And then looking at it for the Broncos, they get a first-round pick back, but I mean, there's a lot of offensive struggles with this Broncos team, and I don't know if Chase Edmonds is the real answer for right now.
No, yeah. I mean, the entire point of the trade was to get a first-round pick. Back to the trade to the Seahawks. So I think Edmonds is more of a fill-in, just kind of like a throw-in. Although, I mean, the Broncos have been lacking, big plays in the backfield without Javonte. Clearly, Melvin Gordon and Latavius Murray are, they're fine early down backs, but they're not, the fastest guys. So Edmonds can kind of add that explosiveness to the backfield that he didn't really get a chance to showcase kind of in Miami. So, there is that. But, I mean, the point of the trade was just to get capital back for Chubb, who, like you said, probably wasn't going to return, and or the Broncos didn't want to pay him, and or they couldn't afford to pay him because of the Russell Wilson, deal. So, kind of all of those above. But, yeah, I think that'll do it for that one. And then now we will go on to the most surprising trade of the day, which was Calvin Ridley going to the Jacksonville Jaguars for a couple of conditional picks that can change depending on if he signs an extension or, how long he plays, kind of variables like that. The funny part about it is that he was suspended for betting on the Falcons to beat the Jaguars, and now he gets traded to the Jaguars. So kind of the irony and all of that was funny to see. But I mean, the Jaguars, they're 2-5, 2-6. They're clearly looking for the future. We know Ridley's, suspended for the season, but obviously this trade's looking towards next year and the future. I mean, we've seen, Travis Etienne really come into his own this season. We've seen flashes from Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram in that offense. So kind of looking at the future core of, Etienne, Ridley, Kirk, and Ingram is a pretty solid offensive core for Trevor Lawrence. We've kind of still seen Lawrence, he's shown flashes, but overall kind of struggled this season. Kareem, what was your kind of thoughts when you first saw this trade? When I first saw it, I thought it was one of those like fake Adam Schefter accounts on Twitter is what I thought.
Yeah, look, I'm not gonna lie. When I first heard about this, I was like, wait a minute, Calvin Ridley? Like, what? Why are they trading for Calvin Ridley? He's not eligible to play until next year. But you mentioned the whole irony in this is that Calvin Ridley is not playing this year because the two teams that were involved in the trade he was bidding on. And I think like it's just kind of coming full circle. Now he's going to the Jags for a couple of conditional picks, depending on whether or not he is eligible to play, and if he signs an extension or he stays with the Jaguars and all of that stuff. But look, this is definitely a big trade. I didn't expect the Jaguars to really acquire a wide receiver after signing, Christian Kirk in the offseason to that massive deal. They brought in Marvin Jones. They still have Zay Jones. And look, I didn't really expect this team to really make a move like this. But as you mentioned, the Jaguars definitely building for the future. They're 2-6 right now. They have a bright spot in Travis Etienne at the running back position, who has emerged as a running back one, pretty much now taking former running back James Robinson's role, who is now up in New York after Breece Hall got injured. But look, you see this Jaguars team right now, and offensively, I feel like they can compete. Offensive, the only bigger question is Trevor Lawrence at this point. He has had some really inconsistent play throughout his time in Jacksonville, and that really brings up the question. Like, I don't want to be a homer, but was Trevor Lawrence really the answer? I mean, Gardner Minshew and Trevor Lawrence, they're putting up, somewhat similar resumes throughout their time in Jacksonville. Maybe a little better for Gardner Minshew just because of his longer stay there. But I feel like Gardner Minshew is really kind of being overlooked because Trevor Lawrence was the number one overall pick, and Jacksonville was already moving on and all that stuff. But I feel like this really brings up the question: is Trevor Lawrence really the answer? Because now you're going to put Calvin Ridley, who is an All-Pro, Pro Bowl wide receiver. They already have Christian Kirk. Travis Etienne has blossomed into what they had hoped for, picking him late in the first round in the 2020 draft. They have Marvin Jones still. They have Christian Kirk, as I already said. They have Zay Jones. They have Evan Ingram. They have so many names on this offense, and I feel like next year, obviously, if they don't get it done with Trevor Lawrence, I honestly feel like he could be on the hot seat. If it's a year from now and Trevor Lawrence is still not getting it done, he could either be traded or he could lose his job, I feel like. And this is all just because of not the amount of pressure, but just from what Kirk Cousins has pretty much, has shown. He's not really that consistent of a quarterback. He's had, some up and down games all around, but when it really comes to the end of it, the Jaguars are providing him with so much around him. It's kind of up to him to see what he can do. And, there was that game on Sunday for the people who got up early and watched the Broncos beat the Jaguars on the road. It just looked like he just had some bad decisions coming down late in the game. And, it just proves, like, is Trevor Lawrence really the answer? I mean, it looked like, this offense at the beginning of the year was moving, and, this offense was doing things, and they could compete in a weak AFC South division. And now they've lost so many games in a row. It's like, okay, is this team really serious on the offensive, on the offensive side of the ball? And it all starts with Trevor Lawrence. So definitely a big shocker. I did not expect to see Calvin Ridley's name being in the trade market this early. There was a lot of rumors that he could potentially be moved in the offseason. But to come at the trade deadline, definitely a big shocker for someone who is not even playing a single game until 2023. So definitely interesting to see what this Jacksonville team will be looking like next year. And for the Falcons, obviously, they're still in first place in this NFC South. It's kind of crazy. The Falcons are in first place in the NFC South. What a year for football! But yeah, definitely a big shocker. I was expecting other guys like Brandon Cooks and DJ Moore and maybe Jerry Jeudy to be potentially dealt throughout this trade deadline fiasco. And the only real big wide receiver we saw being traded was Calvin Ridley, who's not even playing a single snap this year. So definitely a big shocker today.
Yeah, we'll get into some of the players not traded in a little bit, but I mean, yeah, it seemed like the Falcons just wanted to part ways with Ridley just based on what happened. And I agree with you that I think next year will be the make or break season for Terry Lawrence. Once they have, ETN, Ridley, Christian Kirk, Marvin Jones, Evan Ingram, that whole kind of core, that should be more than good enough for Lawrence to at least lead the Jaguars to compete, in a weak division. So I think next year at this point will be, what year 3, right, for Lawrence? Year 3 or year 4?
I think it's year 3.
Yeah, so I think next year we'll definitely. I mean, we're seeing a lot of young quarterbacks struggling. Zach Wilson, name another. So definitely some names that could be, like you said, on the hot seat, so to speak, next year if the struggles continue, into the middle of next season. So now we'll go with the final kind of big fantasy relevant trade that it was announced after the deadline passed, but obviously it was agreed to before the trade deadline passed. Nyheim Hines to the Bills in exchange for Zach Moss and a conditional 2023 fifth. We had seen the Bills kind of want a pass catching running back, and we saw them draft James Cook, and we thought that he might have been the pass catcher that they wanted. But then week 1 we see Cook fumble, and then we think, oh, maybe he's going to be in the doghouse now. But then Cook kind of showed flashes of the past few weeks. But now they land Nyheim Hines, and they figure if they're going to trade for him, they're going to use him. And so the Bills' backfield it was already kind of a mess with Josh Allen, running as much as he does. And then you had Zach Moss, Devin Singletary, and James Cook. Now you replace Moss with Hines, who should have, his role in the passing game. And then Singletary kind of in the early downs, and then James Cook, I guess here and there he'll see the field, but not as much. So, Nyheim Hines moves from the Colts backfield. So, I mean, you should see more volume in Buffalo than Indianapolis because he's not competing with someone like Jonathan Taylor for touches. Obviously, Singletary is less competition, than Taylor in Buffalo. So we should see a little bit more uptick in work. In PPR, he could be a mid to low in RB2, if he does see that volume. Singletary, I like this week against the Jets. I don't think Hines will see a huge role immediately this week, just joining the team, but kind of long term, moving forward past this week. Singletary was already a borderline RB2, and now it's kind of a borderline, low in RB2, high in RB3, and PPR is what I see it. And I think Hines might be more valuable in PPR between the two of them, but still overall a crowded situation where there's not that much, security or that much upside between the two in that backfield. Corey, what was your kind of takeaway from this trade?
Yeah, I pretty much got the same kind of value there. I knew the Bills were looking for a running back. Pretty much throughout the whole trade deadline, they talked to the Panthers about Christian McCaffrey before he ended up getting traded back to his native land of San Fran, where he played football for the for the Stanford Cardinal. And then, I heard Kareem Hunt potentially being traded to the Bills. And so obviously they were looking for a pass-catching running back, to kind of complement Devin Singletary, who's better on the ground. And, Nyheim Hines was kind of a late addition into the trade market. And then right before the trade deadline ended, you mentioned that they just kind of snuck that in at like 12:59 Pacific time to get that deal done before the deadline officially passed. And you mentioned Nyheim Hines, definitely better in the PPR version of fantasy. I believe he definitely could be an RB2, probably mid to low to mid RB2. I feel like just because of how much that offense just loves the pass. And you mentioned Devin Singletary is not really the greatest in that kind of PPR setting, just because he has more of the ground and pound. And I definitely agree that Nyheim Hines will definitely see a big role once he lands in Buffalo officially as they play the Jets on Sunday. And I feel like Hines is definitely going to be used a lot more than he was in Indianapolis, just because obviously in Indianapolis they have Jonathan Taylor. And, that offense is such a run-heavy offense that, he just doesn't fit well. So, and, you mentioned that the Bills, they tried to find their pass catching back in the past couple drafts with Zach Moss, who got traded to the Colts in this trade, along with James Cook out of Georgia, Dalvin Cook's little brother. And, definitely some struggles there, never really developed into anything big. And so, the former Utah running back, gets traded to the Colts. But for Hines, this is definitely a new start for him. I'd like to see how this Bills team, who already offensively is one of the best in the league, how they can step it up even more now that they have a pass catching back. There were maybe some rumors that they could definitely see if maybe another wide receiver come in with the kind of fall off Gabriel Davis has kind of had, but just maybe that's just due to inconsistencies, and they expect him to produce more and more as the season goes out. But definitely a big move for the Bills right here, just not offensively, but for fantasy for Nyheim Hines, definitely a better situation for him. You say you like him this week. I like him too. Against the Jets defense that does not really defend the pass that well, except for Sauce Gardner, who takes away one whole side of the goddamn field. But and I like to see that matchup on Sunday, Stephon Diggs versus Sauce. But this is definitely a big one for the Bills. They definitely they were always looking for another running back because that's kind of the one position that they are not the strongest at. But in a pass heavy offense like this, you bring in a pass catching back. Definitely a big win for this Bills team that is definitely a Super Bowl contender.
Yeah, I mean, the Jets have a really good secondary with Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed, on the outside. But we saw Ramondre Stevenson have some success out of the backfield this past week against them. So, I mean, we'll see what kind of role Hines has in this first week with the team. I'm not expecting too much, which is why I still like Singletary, in this first week where Hines might not be fully acclimated. But season-long, Hines could end up being the 1A possibly given his role in the passing game. And maybe he sees, 8 to 10 carries. Maybe Singletary sees, more carries, but Hines sees more overall kind of touches and targets just given his role in the passing game. So we'll see how that plays out. And then on the Colts side, obviously Taylor's been disappointing this season compared to expectations, but he should remain the clear workhorse. I have received some questions about Taylor, from people who are kind of concerned. And, I have my worries too about the offense. I mean, Sam Ellinger looked, pretty good this past week, but still kind of a low upside offense. So, I mean, Kenneth Walker and Travis Etienne that we already talked about are a couple running backs that I would explore targeting in a trade involving Taylor, but maybe Taylor bounces back. But more importantly, behind him, Deion Jackson is that kind of the number 2 now behind Taylor. We saw a couple weeks ago when both Taylor and Hines were out, he caught 10 passes as the lead back, and then also I believe he saw like 12 carries and then rushing touchdown. So, in like 12-team leagues, maybe 10-team leagues and deeper, Deion Jackson is worth stashing, kind of as insurance for Taylor. And then, if Taylor goes down, and Jackson becomes, an RB2 in that territory. So, the waiver wire is obviously tonight, so Jackson could be someone. If you have a bench spot open, Deion Jackson could be a name to kind of stash, and he could be even a potential flex play, even with Taylor healthy potentially, but an RB2 play for sure, if Taylor was to miss any time for any reason. So now we'll touch on real quick some of the players that were not traded, primarily Kareem Hunt, Brandon Cooks, Jerry Jeudy,
DJ Moore.
Yeah, DJ Moore. Elijah Moore was kind of in some talks before the Jets shut down those rumors. Probably the most surprising was Kareem Hunt to me because I saw reports that the Browns were asking for a 4th-round pick, which it seemed like that wouldn't be that much to ask for Kareem Hunt. We saw Brandon Cooks tweet out his displeasure of not being traded. It sounded like the Texans were saying that he's going to be traded. But I guess partially because of his contract, I think he was owed, like $18 million, something close to that, I want to say. So I assume that had to do with him not being traded. Who was kind of your big surprise of who wasn't traded?
Yeah, I definitely have to say either Brandon Cooks, definitely Kareem Hunt, or DJ Moore. After this kind of whole week, obviously the Panthers, after that almost comeback victory in Atlanta, obviously that deep throw from PJ Walker all the way down to DJ Moore. And, after the Carolina Panthers already traded Christian McCaffrey, it already kind of seemed that, this Panthers team is already in the rebuild mode and they're already moving on from all their stars. Obviously, one of the guys that they have people inquire about Brian Burns on the defense side of the football. I heard the Rams were inquiring about him, offering him two firsts for the Panthers for Brian Burns, but they wanted to keep him as part of the core building into the future. And I was surprised DJ Moore was still kind of one of the key members of that core being built. I thought they would move on from him, and he's seen. A lot of people have kind of seen just his emotion on the sideline, just kind of more checked out. And I feel like that was going to be one name that we would see potentially go to like the Ravens, who have already lost Rashad Bateman for extended amount of time, and definitely have had some struggles at the wide receiver position with that team for the Baltimore Ravens. But that was one name I was surprised to not see moved. Another name, obviously, Brandon Cooks, as you mentioned. He has voiced his displeasure on Twitter with that cryptic tweet, but as you mentioned, his contract situation was a little sticky and a little convoluted. So that probably was a reason why a bunch of suitors weren't really going for the trade. But there are a lot of rumors that Cooks would be traded. I heard the Giants was a big name. I'm surprised the Giants as well. Those are kind of my big three. The Giants, the Giants are 6-2 right now, and they're definitely breaking a lot of barriers this season. And for a team that is doing this good, they don't earn that much respect just because of how their offense is pretty much surrounded by Saquon Barkley and Daniel Jones' ability to run. But and then obviously trading away Kadarius Toney to the Chiefs earlier in the week before the trade deadline, you would think that maybe they would try and get a bigger receiver or a big name receiver to eventually replace them. And nothing really came from that. So that was definitely kind of a shock to see the Giants not really make any big moves to get a receiver. But definitely Brandon Cooks and DJ Moore, two names that I thought were going to be traded to different teams, but just ended up in their positions in Carolina and Houston. It'll be interesting to see how Brandon Cooks, is for the rest of the season, just because of how that offense is, surrounded a lot more by Dameon Pierce, the rookie running back out of Florida. He's definitely had an impressive season, and it's kind of been outshining, the pass offense. Davis Mills has not been a good quarterback this year, and has not lived to all the excitement that he had from last season to this season. And definitely a lot of questions for that offensive end for Carolina. It looks like that offense is kind of thinning out with bigger names, because all the big names have pretty much left. Christian McCaffrey's gone. It's kind of crazy that team went to the Super Bowl in 2016, and they're kind of like the Seattle Seahawks. All of them are almost gone. Cam Newton's gone. McCaffrey's now gone. Moore somehow still there. That whole defense is gone. So definitely two names that I thought were going to be traded. Definitely surprised that they weren't traded. Also, you mentioned Kareem Hunt. I also heard that there were rumors of him being traded, and it's a shame that the Browns didn't get a deal done there. Kareem Hunt, obviously, he put in his trade request really early into the season, and it's kind of crazy. Kareem Hunt's running back one, but he's just behind Nick Chubb, who is just an elite back in himself. So, yeah, you mentioned Hunt along with Cooks and then DJ Moore. Definitely some big names that did not get moved today.
Yeah, I thought the Giants might go after Jerry Jeudy, but it seemed like the asking price might have been too high, so they elected to keep him. One more other name I wanted to touch on was Cam Akers, who I thought was going to be traded, and then I thought he might be released if he wasn't traded. But then I just saw a report from, I believe it was a couple of days ago, that Adam Schefter said that if Akers isn't traded, that he's expected to return to the Rams. I thought he might be released potentially if he wasn't traded. So maybe he does stay with the Rams. I mean, they clearly still have, the whole RB1. So that opening is still there if Akers does return to the team. He reportedly had philosophical and football-related issues or differences, I should say, with Sean McVay, and that's why he kind of left the team for a brief moment. He was inactive last week, and then so now we'll see if he's active this week, if he returns to practice this week. Darrell Henderson was sick last week, and so they had the rookie, I believe it was a rookie running back, who led them against the 49ers. So clearly the backfield is still wide open if Akers can return to the team and kind of get back on track, with McVay and with the offense. So that would be something to keep an eye on. Before we sign off, there's one question we had from Dominic asking if he should trade Deebo for Swift and Jamal Williams. With all these trades, it always partially depends on your roster and who you have at each position, but kind of just going without knowing the information. I do have some worries with Deebo Samuel, with Christian McCaffrey there. Deebo, a huge part of his fantasy upside and value was his role in the running game in the backfield. Obviously, Deebo was sidelined this past week, so we haven't really seen him play in a full game with McCaffrey. But I imagine that with McCaffrey there, Deebo won't see as much involvement, in the rushing game. Obviously, he'll still have his role as a receiver, but his role as a receiver was never really big enough to match his upside that he had, as a runner. And so, Swift was limited this past week, and I think it was the assistant or the offensive coordinator, I believe, said that it's because they want to ease him back, which makes sense coming off an injury. But getting an RB, you're locked into an RB1 between Swift and Jamal Williams, no matter who's starting. And so, given my concerns with Deebo Samuel, without knowing your receiver situation, I would take Swift and Jamal Williams in this offer. Corey, what do you think?
Yeah, I definitely would agree with you there. I feel like obviously knowing the full rosters for both teams involved in the trade would be a lot easier to really establish who is kind of sort of winning or losing the trade per se. But you mentioned Deebo Samuel's value definitely takes a little bit of a downfall after the Niners did trade for Christian McCaffrey, and we saw what the Niners used him for. They used him for every single position, throwing the ball, as a receiver in the backfield where he normally is. They use him on all parts of the field, and I feel like that definitely takes away from Deebo Samuel's, use as that running back that they used to have. But now that they have that, definitely diminishes his value a little bit, as a pure wide receiver in himself. Obviously, we would need to know your wide receiver situation if it's that dire. But I would definitely agree with you. I feel like Swift and Jamal Williams, you're definitely getting an RB1 out of each one of them. Lions, one of the best offenses in the league this year, behind Jared Goff, and now with them trading away TJ Hockenson, definitely opens up a lot more of, especially for PPR, some of the pass down, some of the check downs to either Jamal Williams or DeAndre Swift, and definitely could open some lanes up because TJ Hockenson, even though he was purely more of a receiving tight end, he had some good blocking, but whoever is probably next is going to be purely for blocking, so that may be a bigger outlook for DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams, who are very, very good at catching the ball in the backfield alongside with just the pure ability as a running back. So I would definitely lean, especially in a 10-man PPR, where definitely running backs are definitely going to be a lot more dire, just because of the shift from a running back dominant to a running back committee for each probably for the whole NFL in the next few years. So I would definitely not, if you're trading away Deebo for DeAndre Swift and Jamal Adams, and I would 100% do this trade. But if you're trading away DeAndre Swift and Jamal Adams, then I would definitely not do this trade. But I agree with Ari. I feel like whoever is getting DeAndre Swift and Jamal Adams is definitely not winning the trade, but has a very significant advantage versus Deebo, who definitely has the talent, but now his role as the running back is pretty much diminished now that Christian McCaffrey's there, and now that offense is going to be a lot more of being Deebo Samuel being a pure wide receiver instead of a utility man on offense.
Yep, and then we have Luke asking about Amon-Ra. I mean, he's already a wide receiver 1, and that doesn't change. I mean, we saw the first month or so, he's posting top 5, numbers. He's still a bit of a rust stretch, struggling to stay healthy the past few weeks prior to last week. But, I mean, when healthy, Amon-Ra was already, a top 5 to 10 receiver, and that doesn't change. Do you agree, Kriya?
Yeah, I feel like Amon-Ra has taken his game up so much he's definitely a top 10 wide receiver, even with or without TJ Hockenson. I really don't see his value really being affected so much to where he could potentially enter the top 5, but he's still going to be a top wide receiver for the Detroit Lions in an offense, that is loving the pass right now, and now that they just get more and more healthy. So I definitely would agree with you. Amon-Ra is already top 10, so I don't think it's not like he's going to have a big fall or a big increase. It's still going to be pretty consistent numbers for Amon-Ra St. Brown with or without TJ Hockenson on the team.
Yep, I agree. So I think that will do it for this episode. Thank you all for watching and listening. And to those watching on the replay, please be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Drop a comment if you have any suggestions for episodes. We'll probably catch you soon, either the next day or two, where we'll go over our Week 9 predictions in NFL. And then we'll have plenty of other content coming up on other sports as well as we get, further into the World Series, further into the NBA season, closer to the College Football Bowl games, and, all of that good stuff. So thank you all for tuning in today, and we will catch you all on the next